inside my bones. It goes electric, baby, when I turn it on. All through my city, all through my home. We're flying up, no ceiling when we in our zone. I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. Feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off it, moving so phenomenally. On like the way we rock it, so don't stop. Under the lights when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance.
Hey y'all, how are y'all tonight? I see a lot of people watching so far. I don't know if it's not showing me the comments or what. Let me see, hold on. Maybe it'll show me the comments. I don't know. Guys, I want to welcome you back to, there I seen one. Welcome you back to our normal Tuesday lives. Man, you like my earrings? Thank you. We had a blast for 11 days in a row, celebrating the Dinkins' birthday and our birthday. And, wow, wasn't that fantastic? Oh my God. Anyway, we're back to our normally scheduled lives, and tonight we have a very informative live. And hey, Brandy, Lisa, Shelly, Jean, oh my goodness, glad to see you all here. We've got so much to talk about, so I'm not going to delay it. We are going to get our, thank you, Lisa, well rested to get ready for Orlando and be wore out again, but that's okay. Let's get our special guest on here. Fingers crossed. Yay. The birthday bash was a blast, wasn't it?
Hi.
Hey, Tanya, how are you?
I'm so excited to be on. Yes.
I am excited to have you on. Oh my goodness. I'm telling you, guys, we don't practice, but we make sure we can connect before the live. And man, she was just like telling me all these things, and I'm like, oh my God. What?
I'm known for is I will talk your ear off. My fiance's like, back it behind.
Hey, that's all right. Well, guys, this is Tia Davis, and she's kind of like a expert. So I want to find out. Do what?
I'm always learning. Definitely not an expert, but
Hey, in this hobby, we're all learning. We don't stop, really. But thank you for wanting to share your knowledge with us. I love that. And we're going to try to get back to, some more of the more knowledgeable lives, or we're going to mix things up a bit. So on TikTok. So I'm excited. So now, we know the name Tia Davis. Now tell us a little bit about Tia.
yeah. So I like to joke that I was a marine biologist out of the womb. Grew up on the lake, loving water. My 4th grade science project was if koi, like little comet goldfish, would get brighter in color if they had algae in the tank versus when they had algicide. And so, like, literally been like that. And so my dad is an electrician here in Tennessee, and he put in electricity over at Sustainable Aquatics. And he goes, hey, 14-year-old Tia, you really need to be like at this place working. They were breeding clownfish in East Tennessee, and I've always loved saltwater, had saltwater tanks since I was like, 10. So whenever I went to interview there for their internship, they said, hey, we just want you to count clownfish and keep inventory. I said, sure, great, I'll do that. And they had high school seniors that were doing water changes and things like that. And by the end of the summer, they were like, hey, present your findings and let us know what you found. I said, well, I used an iPad software to identify each of the traits. And then not only did I take all the inventory, I tracked it back to the brood stock. And these pairs produced the most valuable clownfish. And they were like, hired. So I worked there from 14 off the books until I was 18 and went off to college. And I went to college at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. I stayed in contact with SA, worked as their salesperson for a little bit, marketing. But they hopped me around different departments. So I was in larval clownfish raising. I was in broodstock, working with the Pelagic Spawner Project, working with feeding the broodstock clownfish, making the food, live foods, pods. And that was by the time I was 18. So whenever I went off to college, all the people that I was friends with were being doctors or being real marine biologists. And I'm like, I made clownfish in Tennessee. So learned a lot there. But what I noticed with all the people that was in school is they were going to study the ocean or they were going to work on aquariums. And so what I always tell people is there's 3 flavors of marine biologists. There's ones that do like dolphins and aquariums and behavioral, and they do that kind of tourism part. And there's ones that go scuba diving and do like ecology and conservation. And there's really weird, boring ones that are like data and doing trials and water chemistry. I'm that one. So whenever I tell people, I'm like, not what you're thinking. Think like mud and bugs and numbers. So that's
Wow.
so after I graduated, I got my degree in marine biology. I got a degree in chemistry. I got a master's in nutritional biology with a focus in larval fish. And so I came back to SA. I worked in their live feeds department. I worked with research there, loved my time there. And then I kind of had some health stuff, so I'm on my own now. And so I've been doing, small scale trials in my house. One of the projects I've been playing with is saltwater cichlids. I know there's some species that there had been a study and they talked about moving like Jack Dempsey's and Jules and into brackish. I was like, well, what if we, did it full salt? And the issue that people had is you can get them there, but you can't keep them alive and healthy. It causes like liver damage, growth. So I was like, well, what if we made it safe to move the broodstock over, kept them healthy, and then had the babies grow up in full salt, kind of natural selection, let those, and then have those be full salt cichlids available to the hobby. It would be a cheap fish to raise. It can replace a lot of the big fish that come from the ocean that are being cyanide caught, that are being harmfully caught, and they're at a good price point, big, bright, colorful fish. So that's a little pet project I'm doing. And out of that came Ready Reef, which if you've seen me at a show, Ready Reef is my baby. It's basically a product that you can mix powder with RODI water, and it makes live rock. So a lot of the live rock behind me, that's from Petco, the big pink thing. But like this piece here with the PVC, that's actually made from the powder. And because it's calcium carbonate, which is the same thing that live rock is, same thing carob sea is, same things you're saying, what I did is I made that a matrix. So whenever that calcium ion and iron comes off in your water column, it will leach trace elements as you use up iron, which especially in this talk, we're going to be talking a lot about iron. Iron is a metabolite for all of the metabolisms that happen within phyto, within pods, within your fish, within immune systems, all of those different things. So iron is used up really, really quickly in your tank, as well as iodine. Iron and iodine are tied together. So what a lot of people do is they're throwing carbon in their tank, like plain old Peloton. Carbon absorbs iodine. Whenever you absorb iodine, iron can actually be depleted faster. So what I tell people is if you really want to raise your iodine and trace element levels, you're having issues with nutrient management, take your carbon out. So I still keep carbon in my tank for when I need it, especially if you've got coral toxins or you've had a toxin exposed. Carbon's great. But a lot of people blame HLLE on carbon. It's actually not that. So HLLE is known to be something that happens within the immune system. Immune system health is tied with iron. It's a metabolite once again. So you can be giving it all of the right food and you can be doing everything right and you'll still get HLLE because the carbon isn't irritating it so much as it is absorbing all of these necessary micronutrients that eventually cause your fish's health to degrade. So carbon is good, but overusing carbon is a lot of times what people are struggling with. So whenever we're talking about trace elements and we're talking about all these different systems, I'm operating on the assumption you have taken your carbon out. So, but yes.
So what other adverse effects would carbon have, in your opinion?
So I think carbon isn't necessarily bad, but what it is bad is overusing it. So I know some people who religiously, especially in this area, they'll use stuff like Max Out, and they'll swap it every 3 to 6 months. And they go, oh, it's keeping my phosphates down. It's like, yeah, it's keeping your phosphates down because it's keeping your entire metabolism down. So what you're doing is you're basically nuking your tank and going, oh, well, there's no life here. It's like if I wanted to clean my bathroom floor, I could throw a nuke in there and it'd be completely germ-free. Or you could use Clorox and it would be better. So it's kind of an overuse that becomes the problem. It's not necessarily bad, but some of the side effects that you can have are that depletion happening. It can also keep your water. I like to run my tanks dirty. We talked about how much I love softies. I keep high nitrates. I do have phosphate at like 0.4 to 0.8 in my tank. And I think my corals thrive because of it. It's been proven that they do absorb that within metabolism. So whenever you do have your nitrates at 20 and you've got your phosphates at 0 in a 500-gallon tank, to me, that's a problem because you have such a big water volume. So it kind of depends tank to tank what's going on. If you have high acros and you do like straight SPS, you're doing Kalkwasser, carbon's probably not going to be a big deal.
Wow. That is awesome. Now, I know. Do what?
I said I do use carbon still. I'm not dogging on carbon, but maybe not every 3 to 6 months. Maybe like once a year kind of thing. But yeah.
Awesome. Now, you was talking about, you said, I think you said it was your dad that says you needed to be working there. Is that the one that kind of inspired you?
So my granddad was the one that kept fish. We had a green tree iguana, and I didn't talk when I was younger, and that was my buddy. And so the very first few words that I said, I didn't talk until I was 5, but 3 and onwards was I had a Barbie doll, and this green tree iguana would go with me everywhere, and I would hit you and say he'd bite if you try to touch it. So we had exotics. We had Oscars. That was like our dog. He had a big 125, and he was the one who really inspired me to get in the hobby. But my dad, he is not an animal person, my poor dad, and I 1000% am. And so when he saw that sustainable existed, he was like, you need to be in there. So it was a perfect fit. I'm Tia Davis, by the way. I saw a question, who's this on the live? I'm a marine biologist, and I love macros and trace elements and mud and fun extra stuff that a lot of people don't do in their tanks. Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, now let's get into some of the macros. I know when you and I talked earlier, you was telling me about you've kind of got a little write-up about the easiest, the hardest, what each of them needs, just different things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. And also somebody just asked in the comments, do you dose iron? I do not. So I actually will talk about that over towards the end of what I do for the iron. But what we were kind of talking about this in the practice, I think what a lot of people struggle with macroalgae is that they only think that there is Chaeto, Ogo, or Dragon's Breath because that's what's widely available. And the reason that it's widely is because fish stores can keep it alive pretty easily. You don't have to do something super, super, super high tech, but if you have the basics of some techie systems, it will run in Excel easily, and they can provide it. It's easily available. They sell it for pretty cheap, etc. It's pretty easy to grow commercially as well. But that is what I consider a B or A tier algae. So what I think a lot of people miss whenever we're talking about macroalgae is there is on AlgaeBase 308 different algae that would fit into a reef home aquaria, depending on what temperature you kept it at. So I'm talking like 72 up to 80. There's 307 different algae. Not 300. So what I've done for the ones that I provide and I'm growing is I have a ranking system, which I'll show and I'll put in the comments because you're probably not going to be able to read it. But I have a ranking from S to E. S tier is like you've got halides, you dose iron, you dose calcium. You've got aragonite and calcium carbonate sand. Like you are going the extra mile algae. That's stuff like branching hex. That's stuff like the branching coralline that's an algae, like insane stuff. you can absolutely keep it, and you can put it in your display refugium. You can even put it in your display because tanks won't eat things like Halimeta or the ones that are a little bit more complicated. But what I think the hobbyist needs is more towards the C and D. So those are the ones that if you keep it warm and wet, they're going to do well in a good reef environment. And then there's E. E is things like cotton candy algae. I personally love cotton candy algae. One of the things that I swore by when I work at a local fish store, you know that horrible green turf algae you get whenever you first start a tank?
Yeah.
And it's like a pain of. If you add in cotton candy algae and you drop the temperature to about 74 to 76, which most fish can handle pretty easily, you can introduce cotton candy algae and it will outcompete it. If you take your temperature back up to 78, all the cotton candy algae will then die off. You do a water change and all your turf is gone. That is an E-rated algae. It's great. It'll outcompete, but it can be invasive in like S and A and B tier tanks. So I love algae for different purposes. And I was telling you in the live, it's kind of like dating. Some people, it's like, yeah, that's the one for me. I need that one. And other people are like, keep that away from me with a 10-foot pole. Finding the right algae for your system is not so much about what you do, but which algae is going to fix you. So it's kind of working backwards from the problem. So whenever I go to shows, I don't sell you anything until we talk about your tank. So for example, I just did a show here in Tennessee. It was a fish swamp, and I brought my whole collection that was available. And all these people are like, is this freshwater plants? And I'm like, listen, back, spray bottle, go away.
No.
Come up to my tank, they're like, oh, do you have Kato? And I'm like, no, Kato would outcompete my systems. Tell me about your tank and I'll tell you what I have for you. And so there was one guy and he goes, oh, I'm great at macroalgae. I have so much dragon's breath, I've started selling it. And I go, okay, well, which one would you like to try? You know, you don't want to talk about your tank, fine, we'll talk about the algae. And he picks up the penny Halimeta, which is the one that looks like a cactus.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this one's great. Well, do you dose calcium? He's like, no, my calcium's been pretty low. And I was like, I will sell you that, but it will die in 3 days. You have to dose calcium with that. It's got to be at least like 400 to 500. And he goes, well, okay, well, which one would work? And I go, well, you try Ulva. That's really good for removing nitrates and phosphates. And if you're having a problem with dragon's breath getting too much, you can kind of co-culture with that. And so that was the one for him. And then I had another guy come up and he goes, look, I really just need some Kato. And I was like, no, you don't. Tell me about your tank. And so he goes, well, I just started a really nice sump and I've got a divided area and I've been dosing iron and I went ahead and put a radion on the bottom. I was like, you don't need freaking Kato, dude. That's going to grow outside of your tank and like get at. No, what you need is some of these really cool ones. Try the, you know, the blue hypnea. This will be a really slow grower, but it's fun to watch. Try the branching hex. I love those. And Halimeta, you can grow way more cool things than just Kato. And he's like, well, I really just want nutrient phosphate control. And I was like, well, here's a couple other ones that are not as cool. You're lame, but here you go. And so different people may walk into an expectation and then not realize there's something far better for them. Another girl got the cactus Halimeta, the little discoides one, because she wanted to put some algae in her display tank that her tang wouldn't eat. Because she had grown the Kato and she'd grown the Caulerpa and she'd grown all this other stuff, her tang would just mow it down. I'm like, okay, well, the good thing is this is toxic, so your tang is going to take a bite out of it one time and then leave it alone. So she didn't have a refugium, she didn't have a sump. It was just something that was perfect for her without all of the extra stuff. So I think there's an algae for everybody. It's just they're not available and people don't know what they need and there's not a lot to know about it out there. So I'm trying to fix that because I think everybody should have some algae in their tank. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's, you know, maybe we didn't realize that there was life outside of, you know, grape Caulerpa or Chato, you know. So, and to realize that there's so many things out there that is specific for each tank and what you're wanting to do with it. I think that's amazing.
I'm really excited to provide it for people too. So one of the things I think a lot of people realize, and they need the algae and they want to, and they order from, like, for example, whenever I was reaching out, I only want to do aquaculture and macroalgae for a couple of reasons. If you get it wild caught, the macroalgae is basically like the sewer of the ocean. So if you go out and you go to a bog and you pull out a big handful of super cool, Fauchia or something like that, and you go, I have Fauchia for sale. And they go, oh my gosh, I can never get a hold of that. Yeah, I'll buy it, I'll buy it, I'll buy it. Bogs can have some nasty anaerobic bacteria that they hold where this Fauchia is naturally found. And then you put it in your tank and all of your tank gets horrific, like flesh-eating disease and horrible stuff. So ordering online wild caught is not really an option. It's always been there, but there's a reason people don't do it. So I messaged everybody that had the macroalgae I was looking for available. So I'm trying to do all 308. I know that's, but I'm gonna try. So I was reaching out to everyone and messaging people and trying to see who had what available. And one person barely spoke English. It was very clear they were importing, had no idea what they had. And they keep sending me their list of what they have available. And I'm like, you can't put that in a tank. You can't put that in a tank. You can't put that in a tank. So I've contacted 13 people that have met my insane high grade of what you should do for macroalgae culturing. And what that is quarantining it just like a fish. You want to make it grow, make sure it's not having disease. I keep mine quarantined for 6 weeks before it's being actually moved into a farm setting. So most of the corals out in the garage have not met that mark yet that are imported. Mosaic Macros is one of the people that is aquaculturing. They've had an aquaculture growing for 5 years. Those are the ones I have available right now. Everything else is still cooking. But you want to make sure what you're getting is clean. So I'm actually modeling a lot of my greenhouse for macroalgae growing after Grace Romano at the Reef Farm, which if you've never heard of her, she's amazing. It is a fully aquacultured, she has 3,000 gallon vats of corals, and she's been growing the same strains for 20 years. And she'll have her alkalinity drop to the bottom, and some will die and this much will live, and she allows it to grow back. And then she'll have a bunch of RODI come into her tank, and then she'll drop it down to one nub, and then it'll come back. And so her corals are like bullet. And so all of these little finicky macroalgae that get diseases and they die really easy and they come in and from a bog and they'll ruin your tank. I want to make sure it is clean, available, free of all these problems, and then sell it to people, because as everyone knows, if something gets a bad reputation, it's over. So I want to provide clean, provide healthy. I want to provide aquaculture, not taking from the wild where it's needed, especially because a lot of macroalgae in the wild is being depleted because of algicide runoff, because of pesticide runoff. So, yeah. And somebody just mentioned it in the comments. I just saw it. Things going sexual. So one of the things I think that comes with macroalgae and the lack of knowledge about it is things like grape caulerpa. Grape caulerpa is in my display sump. And that, if you have had it before, should make you like poop your pants. And so what it can do is if you provide it in its natural environment, where it has tons of nutrients, where it has tons of light, where it's amazing heaven for algae, it'll go, I want to have as many babies as possible. I'm going to spew them everywhere. And some things like Caulerpa taxifolia, or I think that's Mexican fern is the common name. I try to keep all scientific names. But Caulerpa taxifolia will put off babies and go sexual and put out a toxin. So a lot of people have had horror stories with macroalgae, and that's actually why they kind of faded out of the hobby, was because people had so many nightmare stories about it. Well, we had people who are big macroalgae fanatics, and there's people like Algae Barn really interested in putting that knowledge out there and studying it. Keeping it contained and having 24/7 lights basically makes it to where they can't go sexual. So what you have is algae that's not going to spread everywhere. So I really like that we are learning, but part of that comes with buying things you know about instead of going to the fish store and being like, this has pretty bubbles, and putting it in your tank. So I think that's a lot of it, is knowing what you're putting in your tank. But yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of macros that I think are just beautiful.
Yes.
But like you said, if you don't find one that you need or is going to work for your system, then you're not going anywhere with it except for downhill, because, you put the wrong one in there, or you don't have the correct care and things for it, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's what done it, And in actuality, the macro is just, innocent until you know, introduce it to a different system with different chemicals and different things. So yeah, I get it. That's awesome.
So somebody just commented down here, any recommendations on battling a red turf algae? I do identify algae if you'll send me pictures of it. But really, I can't ever give a firm how to fight something without knowing what it is it's fighting. So like, for example, Ryan Phillipsborn was messaging me. He works at Algae Barn. He was like, hey, I'm wondering about epiphytes, how to fight them, which epiphytes is basically like a parasite on your macroalgae. He's like, and I want to fight this very specific epiphyte. I had to write him a 9-page document on how to even go about it. So the first thing you have to do if you're fighting any sort of algae is identify what you have. You're either going to have to get a microscope and spend time on AlgaeBase and try to guess, or you can send it to me. I don't do anything with my life except work at a primary care where I pick up phones and yell at old people. So you can just send it to me and usually I'll help you identify it, but a microscope picture helps the most. Once you know what it is, send me over your parameters, because macroalgae is extremely responsive to parameter control. So like, for example, you mentioned red turf algae. Most of the time that's cotton candy. If your temperature is 76 or below, I would suggest upping it up to 78 and then removing silicates. Get like a silica buster and throw it in. 90% of the time it'll go away. It's probably just cotton candy algae, which I talked about a little bit earlier. Cotton candy algae, I actually was talking with Ryan about, because I think it's what's on his Cato. So his Cato, he's growing at 77, which means red cotton candy algae can't go crazy and die off and do all that.
Right.
So what I said was your vanadium. What I think happens is Cato, when it is low in vanadium, will have cotton candy come, or when it's high in vanadium, sorry. When Cato is exposed to higher vanadium, cotton candy will actually come in and absorb it. And cotton candy is actually a really, really cool one. It's one of my favorites, because damselfish actually use mysid shrimps and farm cotton candy algae because it is high in a lot of these amino acids and vanadium. Reef Builders put out a really cool article about it. I'm trying to get a hold of the damsels and actually do it in a farm scale setting, because I think that'd be really cool. But damsels are actually shown to pull off other pieces of algae and increase that level of vanadium to try to eat it. So that's why they farm the cotton candy, is to get all that in there. So you got to look at your parameters. Went on a real weird tangent there, but first thing is identify what you got. Second thing is identify your parameters. Solve that there. And then once you've got perfect water, it's still a problem. Then we can actually identify if it's something that is symbiotic or something that is parasitic. Because sometimes algae will develop a symbiotic relationship to kind of help things it needs. So you might need to dose something. You might need to switch up the flow. You might need to do a couple of different things, try to combat it if it's symbiotic. If it's parasitic, what you're going to have to do is take another separate area. Like say, for example, you have the Cato with the cotton candy. Take a separate area, culture a smaller section of it, keep doing that until there's little to no parasites on it. Do a freshwater dip and then put it back. Usually that takes about 4 weeks. And then if you still have a problem, start over. So, but yeah.
Go back to the drawing board, right?
Yes.
Now, there was a question, and I'm going to get to it. I kind of jotted it down. Is what do you think about dove snails in a sump to help keep macro clean and able to grow?
It depends on the macro. So dove snails are really, really good at keeping filamentous algae, which is the stringy type algae, clean. That's how they became known as the cleanup crews, because they cleaned Cato really, really well. What they aren't good at is not eating non-filamentous algae. So let's say you do something like ulva. Ulva will be a very yummy snack to the dove snails. So part of that is knowing what algae you have and then talking about your setup, and then I can kind of recommend things. Algae Barn actually just has an article they put out about cleanup crew in a sump, and I'm rewriting an article for them for what kind of macroalgae you put in a display sump. So things like the Fauchia or the branching hex or the carpet helmet, all those different things. What kind of algae you have, what kind of cleanup crew you would need for it. So that's a whole different ballgame. Message me and we'll talk. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, can you tell me what a brief, I know there's a gazillion, but out of the most popular macroalgae, is there any certain ones that's better at controlling or managing the nutrients?
Yes. So if you have just a basic saltwater tank setup, I don't need any details about it. My number one recommendation is Ulva for a couple of reasons. It's called sea lettuce. It grows in sheets. And so instead of Kato, where it needs to be tumbled, or, red dragon's breath, where it needs to have iron and the fancy light, Ulva, I have been growing in a bucket in the closet with high nitrates and high phosphates. It'll just absorb and absorb and absorb and absorb. And it's really, really low need, and it absorbs incredibly high. There was actually a paper that I was citing for one of the Algae Barn articles where it absorbs faster than Kato nitrates and phosphates. So I think the wrong algae has actually been advertised to the hobby the whole time just because we didn't know about it. Ulva is my favorite. I will be showing you it later. I actually grow it in the Pico that I was showing you earlier with y'all know the Beta waterfall tanks? The ones with I put macroalgae in there and they love it. And so I have my Ulva little piece of display one in there. But yeah, Ulva is my knee-jerk favorite. It's amazing. It absorbs nutrients the best, hands down. I don't care what anyone says. There's a couple little, depending on your setup, could be better. Like Dragon's Breath, if you have an S tier tank, it'll probably absorb better because you're giving it all the nutrients it needs, but it's also taking in a lot more nutrients. So it just depends on the setup. But Ulva, knee-jerk favorite.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've just come to know just these basic macros. It's like we've never really been introduced to the widespread of the different types and what they do and the best ones to have in your tank. Everyone's tank is different. And I get where, someone is wanting to know, would this algae be good for my tank? Well, there's only one way to know. Message Taya and, give her the rundown of your tank and what you've got and, all that. And, she's willing to help, guys. So take advantage of that because she's so knowledgeable on everything. Now, what is your fastest growing macro? Well, hands down, what grows the fastest?
Depends on the parameter, but probably Ulva once again. Ulva is just a machine. But one of the things that you touched on that macros you have to find the right one for you. One of the main things that's changed is that the hobby has evolved too. More people are ICP testing. More people are worrying about keeping the trace elements in check. And so this algae that people in the past have not had good luck with, hasn't grown fast, hasn't seen a lot of productivity. Now we're understanding which ones do well in which environment. So the hobby evolving, especially whenever people start talking about which one grows the fastest, which is going to perform well, giving me an ICP test, and not one. It's basically like going to the doctor. If you go once a year, you're not going to know if you have a chronic problem. You're basically going to go and they're like, your blood pressure's fine, your blood work came back normal, go home. Whereas if you went every single 3 weeks, maybe they would notice more of a pattern kind of thing. So being able to give multiple ICP tests and multiple issues that you've seen over the course of 3 to 6 months would help me more to identify which one's going to grow the fastest, which one's going to solve a specific problem, more than just kind of a 2 or 3 minute chat. So that's really cool, is like consulting and looking at long term and which one's going to grow the best. And especially if you want things like a display refugium, that's a whole different ball game than if you just want something to control your nitrates and phosphates in a fowler. So big difference.
Gotcha.
But down, if you ask me what my favorite one is, the best performer, it's probably going to be Ulva.
Now, out of all the algae that you've had anything to do with and that you have knowledge of, which one grows so slow?
Blue hypnea. It's horrible. Blue hypnea and Faucia, it's so slow. One of the things, the Orange Galaxy, it's so cool. And I got like a booger. You know how they talk about like booger frags? This was like, I thought he didn't ship it. And I was like, dude, really? It's like this big. He's like, that's a great starter. And I was like, you lie, but okay. And so I put it in my tank, and I have had it for about 2 weeks, and it has put off like 1 shoot, and all the others are like exploding. So Orange Galaxy is super slow, and it's one that I was super excited about too. But Blue Hypia, Orange Galaxy, Faucia, those 3 are nightmares for me. But there's another person that was messaging one of the 13 that aquacultures, and he was the one that sent it, and he goes, oh, I've changed up this, and now it's exploding. So each one's a little bit different, and I'll kind of show you how I've been setting it up to reach each algae's potential, because certain ones are doing certain things and you're going to have to monitor each little parameter. But if you have a slow growing algae, it's probably a sign of like a canary in the mine kind of thing. So like, for example, my tank, I had a velvet outbreak and it was horrible. I lost a lot of fish. I Polyp Lab Medic, I saved a couple of them, but velvet's just a nasty disease. And I was noticing having a lot of like phosphate rising, and I was like, what the heck? And so my algae started browning off at the ends. And I was looking and I was trying to do research into it. And it turns out that Polyp Lab Medic is technically a salt. And what it can do is have your magnesium bottom out. And I don't test for magnesium because I dose so much extra stuff. And my snails are being really slow. So the algae browning out at the ends and coming in was a sign of magnesium deficiency. And that gave me like a canary in the mine kind of thing to let me know that not only is it growing slower, it was not so hot, and my tank had a much bigger problem that I hadn't even noticed yet. So that's why I think everybody should have a little bit of algae, because if you have, you know, your dragon's breath is all of a sudden melting, you're probably having some sort of trace element thing going on. Like, for example, torches. Torches love vanadium and iron. And a lot of times people have torches melt and polyp bail out, and they go, well, my water's perfect. It's like, okay, what do you mean your water's perfect? And they go, well, I have my aquaspin results. And it's like, well, that's not going to help me with what I'm talking about here, you know? So doing the ICP testing regularly, and by regularly, I mean once every 6 months, can help you identify problems faster as well. But he had, and I asked him, I said, do you have macros in your tank? And he said, yeah, well, I used to have red dragon's breath. I said, did it melt? And he said, yeah. And I was like, ha! Vanadium.
Oh, yeah.
ICP test and sent it back, and his iodine and vanadium, that were the only two things wrong in his tank. So it can help you troubleshoot if you have like an S tier tank and still something's not right. So that's one of the most frustrating things in the hobby, is like, I'm doing everything right, why is this not working? So, but yeah.
Now,
very frustrating.
I read across the question a while ago, and I was trying to write it down because I knew I'd forget. There's actually two of them that I caught quick enough. Is there a preferred algae for tight spaces, such as if someone has an all-in-one tank? Is there something?
So I actually am a big BioCube fan. I was pretty popular on the forums there for a little bit because I had a mechanics shelf, and each BioCube had a different biome. One was cold water, one was sargassum with an anglerfish, one was a high SPS tank, one was a softies, one was a refugium, and I only put my macros in the back chamber of a BioCube. So I actually have one here. I'm gonna, not professional, I'll show you the back of my dirty BioCube. So this chamber back here, I actually have some dead here. This is a saltwater pothos. I have gotten a couple of them to go saltwater, and I just didn't take it out because it looked like poop. But this was where I kept my macros, and all I did was I took a clip-on book light. You know, it has the white and the blue from Walmart, $15, and I pointed it down. And I even had at one point like an air stone down here, and that's how I had my right back here. And things like Kato and Red Dragon's Breath aren't going to be able to handle that. So you've got to do some cooler ones. Like, I'm going to go show you some algae now.
Yay!
This is my...
We get to take some algae.
I'm also insane about cleaning. I spray off with hydrogen peroxide in this mud room before I go out. So let me be nuts for a second.
Sure.
Okay. And this is the cool system. It's a freaking wreck out here, so I'm only going to show pictures of it. But how I've been growing my macro is actually hydroponic. So I have these big old kois being tortured in 125s. And that one has a big chamber on it, so that way the pH stays high. And I take that very, very, very heavy nitrate water, and I salinify it up to about 1.15, 1.015. Get brackish. And I actually am transitioning cichlids, which I'll actually show you one. This is the first time I've ever showed one. This is a brackish being turned saltwater cichlid from my broodstock. He killed his wife, and I decided I hated him, so he's for sale now. But yeah, he is going to go full salt inevitably. He's at 1.20 now, And so that's how I do the brackish chamber system. And then once we have the brackish with some things like mangroves, with some things like my Kenya trees that I've turned brackish with some other brackish macros, they then go over to be resalinified and then put into the farm. So you were talking about things that go great in a BioCube. This is true sargassum. And then this is a different kind. This is not actually red ogo. This is the, oh my gosh. You have all my labels in a paper. I'm terrible. But they're all in order, so I can keep up. But something like this would be great, where it grows taller. Pink intricate, especially if you have like a high level AOI. Like if you've got one of those like water boxes that's a AOI, AIO, I'm mixing words up. Anyway, if you have a chamber, pink intricate that grows really tall where you don't have a lot of space may be better for you for nitrate export rather than things like Kato or Dragon's Breath or all that other junk. But I have some pretty cool ones in there. I think Tian's blue hypnea is back there if you can see it. It's like, oh, camera focus. If I that's your blue hypnea. This is all the frags that were for sale at the last show. And so since they were at a show, I'm so insane. They're being re-quarantined for 6 weeks just in case there was some sort of aerosol or something. I'm nuts about the cleanliness. I've got a really cool one back there too. That's the true string of pearls. There's some false string of pearls that don't do well in the hobby. So a lot of people buy that one and then it fails and they're like, oh, it's hard. True string of pearls is almost bulletproof. I got that from Grace's Reef Farm. She was like, I got this weird algae growing. And I was like, mine now. And I've been growing it. But a lot of people don't realize, this is going to eat me alive. I'm going to have to like re-quarantine. But it only started like a week ago, so it's fine. So like this guy. This is branching. It's more like a coral. So if you have an AIO, you can put this in your display, even if you have herbivores, as long as it's not an urchin or a rabbitfish. And they will not eat this because it's so high in calcium, it's not delicious. So things like Ulva or Kato, which there's my Ulva, big fan. This is going to be Tang Crack. They love this. This is like their favorite thing in the whole world. If it goes crazy in your sump and it starts to become a problem, just toss it in your main tank. They will eat it. They love it.
Now,
I have some
what was that one you just had in your hand?
Ulva was this one.
Okay, got it. Yes.
Branching. This is Ogo, and then this one is actually the red razor. So a lot of people have a hard time telling them apart, but whenever you put them right next to each other, it's really obvious. This one is my baby. Everybody talks about Pom Pom. Pom Pom's lame. This is the cool one. So this is Faucia. It's so cool. It grows in a really nice pattern. That's actually my broodstock piece. That's all I can get it to grow. And it's even got a little poo-poo spot I got to take off. So, but this one is neat. Pom Pom is lame. Get that one. It's way cooler. And then this one is actually an algae, but it shows nobody can tell what it is. This is Dead Man's Fingers. So whenever I put it into my quarantine tank where it will now live, it's almost like a sponge, but it's like a sponge and an acro had a baby. Like it's really weird looking. And so that's why the display tank is super cool. Like I used to have a super impressive like high SBS tank. I had Dead Man's Fingers in there. And every single time people go, whoa, what's that? And I'm like, not the $1,000 colony. You want the cool algae. That's what does it for you. So but it's really cool. And if you have something like a seahorse tank, like you don't have to put corals that are going to kill your seahorse in there. There's plenty of really, really cool macros that you can throw in there. That's far better.
That is amazing.
I had a big hunk that I sold at the last show. I've got my red razor there in the back. But there's so many cool ones that look like corals. Like, you could get into these and have your own tank just full of so many different varieties. All the demons are down here. This is my Caulerpa crap. This is the hospital tank, the ones that look like duty, or they're throwing out runners where they're not allowed. But yeah, so I've got a bunch of different ones in there. Got some lobe fern, got Mexican fern. I have a list of everything I have available, and like if people theoretically wanted to order it, they probably could. Mermaids fan. That's one of the aquacultured mermaids fans. Supposedly you can't do that. I just took care of mine and started putting off runners. So that's cool.
That
But
is
yeah,
awesome.
I don't
Now,
use a lot of.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
someone just asked, do you have Blue Scroll?
I do not. Blue Scroll hates me. I've ordered it twice and it dies. I think that's one of those like likes neglect. Like it does not like my salt or something. I guess I don't know because I've tried a couple different parameters, but I have somebody else that was dying, and I said, you know what, take it. Maybe it'll live for you. Have fun. And they just had instant ocean, so I was like, ah, whatever. I'll make $5 on it. I don't care. And she was like, it's doing so good. And sent me a picture, and I was like, die. So it just hated me for some reason, but everything else seems to love it. It's just the Blue Scroll has issues with me, but yeah, and it is not to have a refugium hooked up to your tank. So what I do is these little Sam's Club tubs. These are the restaurant clubs at Sam's. I think you get 2 of them for $15, and you want to make sure that you actually are using crushed aragonite. Not Fiji pink, not Hawaiian black, nothing else. You want the crushed aragonite, the one that looks like the topping to a graham cracker pie. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
This stuff, that one, the big one, because it will leach calcium easier than any prepackaged sand. And you want to make sure that you have at least 5 inches. So this is approximately 3.5, 4. You want to go all the way up to here. So these tubs are the perfect height to give you that much sand. And then I use, where's an extra one? Oh, here. These were $3. $3 at PetSmart on clearance.
Wow.
They had the suction cup side. You can lay it on the side and adjust the flow. That's how I do all of my low flow algae. You can turn it up and put it on high. And it even has like a little, dang it, where'd I put it? Oh, I'm always losing crap. But it has like I'll show you it on my regular setups. Like a little nozzle almost.
Yeah.
Hang on, there we go. Like that.
Yeah.
So it has like a nozzle to control the flow. And for the ones that like to be blasted, like the Ogo and all that, you can turn it up. And it's really, really adjustable. They're super cheap. If you even have a hang on the back refugium, and when I say hang on the back refugium, I'm talking about like literally a freshwater filter would be a great hang on the back refugium where you just slap a light on that bad boy. And that's what I use. You can buy the fancy ones, but I like guppy breeder boxes, hang on the back filters hooked up with a crappy light. I personally use halides. That's why it's so bright, even on the night lights. Some of them are on just to keep things from going sexual. But halides and like these Rectus Sun bulbs, people talk about, oh, you gotta buy the one with the red light. No, you don't. What you're missing is the red spectrum. Lizard lights are way cheaper, way brighter, and yeah, they look like crap, let's be honest, but they work.
I use a lizard light, and for, after the clowns, the babies hatch out and stuff, like they've got to have light of some sort, basically all the time. And it's dimmable. And so like I can turn it down as low as I need it, or I can crank it up. And so they're like super inexpensive.
And they have UVA and UVB, which I think that we are learning more about the role that UVA and UVB play into corals and algae especially. Because if you think about where algae is found, it's typically tide pool, tidal areas. Not a lot of them are deep water, at least not the ones that are available to the hobby. So 308 that I'm talking about, those are extremely exposed to sunlight. And to act like a plant might not need certain wavelengths, even though it's being blasted by them in nature, is just kind of silly to me. So what I am trying to do is make things that are used to having that much UVA and UVB. What the idea is we're going to have a greenhouse, and it's going to be just like, Grace's Reef Farm, but with glass. And that glass is going to let in all the UVB but one. That's UVC, I think, and it's going to come off. So we're going to start by taking wild caught, quarantining them, getting them used to sunlight through a window. Then we're going to go through and put it on a separate half of the greenhouse where it's going to then have UVB reflected off. So it only has the UVA. Whatever lives through that will then be exposed to something like a halide or a radion, where it has the UV, it has some IR, but it's not got the full wavelength, and then we'll have a lot of die-off. And then we'll expose it to something like a Kessel or something like a Reef Bright, something traditionally used in the hobby. Because one of the things I was talking about earlier, that wild-caught algae, you plop it in your tank, it's used to sunlight, and you're exposing it to the spectrum that our corals have been used to. It's not going to perform well. So I'm trying to have aquacultured corals that are used to the standards that are already in your tank, have grown, have thrived, around ready to be shipped before I'm providing that to someone. Otherwise, it's just setting you up for failure. So that's a really big thing, is light. So
Right.
several
Now,
lights. Yeah.
let me ask you this before the question gets away from me, because I barely jotted some stuff down about it. Since we keep talking about macro going sexual, which is not fun for a hobbyist, is there ever a time that it's beneficial for a macro farm if it goes sexual?
No, but because I try to keep everything so clean. One of the things that does happen is most epiphytes are other algae. So let's say I had something like sargassum, and I'm growing it in the same tank, not in a quarantine. I'm talking like a farm, commercial, growing it. And I put in some caulerpa runners just to kind of sit on the bottom, and the sargassum will sit on the top. If that caulerpa goes sexual one time, those spores can live for up to 4 weeks. So let's say it's 3.5 weeks, and I ship it to your tank. And you put your sargassum half in the sand and half out. Your tank is going to explode in caulerpa. Your tank is not exposed to 24/7 light. Now you have potentially caulerpa taxifolia going sexual and putting off toxins in your tank. Not a good idea. So I never want any of my stuff to go sexual. The only things that I'm allowing to be in darkness or be in conditions that would make them go other species sexual is because that species doesn't do it. So no, never sexual here. Nope. While it would be an easy way to make more money and make more algae quicker, it's not worth risking it to the customer, because at the end of the day, I remember being 13 and getting my saltwater tank and going to a fish store, and I just wanted something colorful. I had no idea. I hadn't started working at Sustainable yet. I just wanted some cool saltwater fish. And they go, hey, take a blue damsel and an emerald crab. And it's like, oh, no. I got so screwed over by so many people who wanted to just make a quick buck, or so many people telling me to buy equipment that I didn't need and telling me to buy this. If you just buy this, it'll fix it. I hate that. I like going back to the roots, understanding how chemistry works, understanding how this ecosystem that you've built functions, and then providing you with the tools you need for success. So while it would be very, very, very so much easier for me to make everything go sexual and sell a ton of algae, it's not worth compromising how clean the culture is in the end goal to make money quicker, which is probably why I'm broke.
Now, here a little bit back, there was a question from Elisa. I got it wrote down, but I've been waiting to get to it. It says, question, what is the minimum photo period macros should have?
Depends on your species. So that's probably going to be my number one answer for everything, is identify your species first. The minimum photo period with something red is going to be 8 to 10 hours, in my opinion. That's what I do. It's a natural daylight cycle. Those things need a lot of things. Like a S-tier algae, I would say 8 to 10 on most of those S-tier algae. On things like A and B, talking like Cato, talking like Ogo, your usual stuff, probably 6. You could probably get away with 4. It's going to depend on what goes sexual. It's very, very varying. But if it was blanket statement, all algae, I would say give it at least 6 hours of light, but never more than 10. Because what you can do is induce growth. So a lot of people see this with anemones, is they have such good conditions and they do something really stressful. Like they'll do a big water change, and now there's a ton of nutrients, there's a ton of everything, and your anemone will get really, really big, and it'll start splitting, but it's splitting because it's stress. You've induced something unstable into its environment, and it's splitting because it's trying to survive. Algae will do something really similarly. If you give it a lot of nutrients, if you give it a lot of light, it will grow really, really, really big, and then it'll melt. Or it'll grow really, really big and go sexual. And what you're doing is you're just setting up a domino. So if I had to have a blanket statement, 6, never more than 10.
Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. That is awesome. Okay, someone had asked, and this was quite a while back, but I did jot it down. And no, it was not me, but someone had asked, do you have any tips on blue hypnea?
Perfect water. That's probably what it likes the best. I do find that it absorbs a lot, because with all of my tanks, I run ICPs, and I run ICPs, and I run ICPs, and I run ICPs, and I want to make a pattern to see what makes it thrive. And so if I can time up what parameters cause it to do well, I'm going to go ahead and have a hypothesis that some things could help it. And I find that blue hypnea really, really, really likes potassium. So we were kind of talking earlier, I don't endorse anybody unless they pay me. Let's be very clear. If you pay me, I'll endorse you. But I will tell you what I use in my tank. I use Tropic Marin salt. I find that it's the most stable. I've tried Fritz Red Box, whatever one isn't the fish one. I liked it okay, but I did notice that my magnesium and my pH was not as stable. I also kind of like the Red Sea salt, but I find that I have to do more water changes because it depletes really quickly. I don't know if that's because my corals are growing and the metabolism happens or what, but I just use Tropic Marin because their line is actually formulated for their trace element product. If another company comes out with a salt that has a trace element dosing product built in that pairs chemically and mechanistically with their salt, I'll probably switch over because this is really expensive. But A+ elements, if you're having a hard time with the blue hypnea, try doing the A and the K. I'm literally reaching into my tank alchemy setup. But I really like this one as well. Keeping potassium in it seems to help it do better. I do notice that mine goes brown. I don't know if it's the kind of lights that I have, since I do use things that have UVA and UV and UVC. I did notice that things that are exposed to the higher wavelengths tend to lose that color. But my blue hypnea is growing, and it's growing well, but it is no longer blue. It's like a navy. So, I don't know.
Wow.
There's also a thing, too, though. Like, I saw a post the other day. Somebody was like, look at this beautiful rock flower I got. It was, bleached as hell. But it was in the blues, and the green, since it was so bleached, it was like highlighter yellow. And I was like, yeah, that's going to go away, buddy. That thing's half dead. It's going to be the traditional red and green eventually, but
Right.
So I don't know with potentially blue hypnea, if it doesn't do well, it goes lighter, or if it's doing better, it goes darker. I have no idea, or if it's just my lights. But I had it at the show, and somebody's like, that's not blue hypnea, it's not blue. I was like, but you take it to blue. Yeah.
Well, every tank is different, and it'll be interesting as you carry on with these different experiments and see what, and you come out with the research and stuff. I'm just blown away. Someone had asked, I've got a couple questions here that I've jotted down. What ICP test do you use?
Ooh, once again, I don't endorse anything unless they pay me, but ICP analysis, for the sole reason that on the app, you can add in tanks and they will match up your test to your tank and make a chart for you. And it saves me a lot of labor. Not all ICPs are created differently, and I'm not endorsing or dogging on any certain brands, but some ICPs that I have found, so whenever I was selecting which one for me, what I did is Oak Ridge is right down the road. And at MACNA, we had gotten the one from ICP analysis, and I had the one I think is offered by API. I don't know. It was another one. I think it's the one offered by API. And I sent off 3 identical samples from the same tank that had just been cycled, and I knew what the parameters were because it had never been exposed to anything. So I sent it off there, sent it off there, and then I took it to Oak Ridge. I have a contact there, and she ran a mass spec test. So a ICP test is only as good as the software that is reading the mass spectrometry readoff, which a mass spectrometry test, long story short, it measures wavelengths of a laser kind of. So it's basically spitting off numbers. And anybody who's ever done organic chemistry knows how horrible reading a mass spectrometry test was. I read it for 2 results, and I matched up which ICP test got closest to it. And I liked the ICP analysis test, and that's the one I went with. So if you really want to get the best one, learn how to read mass spectrometry and go find a university. But I would rather kill myself, so I'm not going to. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So,
I'm good. I'm good. Now, someone had asked, while we're on the ICP test, just out of curiosity, someone has asked, have you ever used the Reef Labs test?
I have not. And that's just because I live in, middle of nowhere, Tennessee, and accessibility is a really big thing. I try not to send money to the Reef Amazon. I'm not dogging on any companies very loudly, but I try not to order things from them. And so if I can't get them in my local fish store and the ICP test is not bothering to reach out to local fish stores to reach people like me, I really don't want to fool with them, to be honest, because my whole thing is I want to be accessible to everyone. I want everyone to do well. And so if I'm using tools that aren't even accessible to me, why would I then endorse them and use that for my mechanism? So that's why I haven't used it.
Absolutely.
And
this was quite a while back. I know it's off the ICP test, but someone had asked, can grape caulerpa put off a toxin?
it technically, according to papers, cannot, but I can tell you I had grape caulerpa go sexual and lost all my fish. So, and I know it was grape caulerpa because it was actually PCR tested for genetics and it was grape caulerpa. And yeah, so I don't know if it is because you it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole on whenever your tank crashes. It's usually not one thing that causes the dominoes.
Combination. Yeah.
A mix of several things. So what it could have been is whenever that grape caulerpa went sexual, it caused my ammonia to rise because it died off, and then it's just like a tank crash. Or it could have been that it put off a toxin, which is why it's so hard unless you're running an exact mass spectrometry test on your water the second some toxins put out or the second it spawns. You're not going to catch it because how do you know if it's not your sand bed dying off and making a toxin where your sulfur exploded? How do you know it's not blah, blah, blah? And so I think a lot of these studies, considering how many macroalgae are out there and how many times they're misidentified, in the article that I wrote for Ryan Phillipsborn, Jake Adams, God love him, great guy, had misidentified his version of Cato in an article, and I used it as an example. It's so hard, unless you're some weirdo who only does macroalgae, to identify which one you got. And so how do you know, even academically, unless you're PCR testing it for genetics, what you've got, and then study it on a scale? So me, I would just rather put a 24/7 light on grape caulerpa and let it do its thing. That's what I have in my display tank. Even though I've had a bad experience with it, it's kind of a toss-up until somebody proves it. Hopefully I can prove it, but I dropped you.
That's hard. Now, someone has also asked, do you have a website?
I do not, and that is because I know the second that I open the floodgates to order macroalgae, y'all will sell me out. So I want to make sure my farm is being set up, which I'm very excited about. We actually have, if landscapers will come out and do it, a plan to have a pond that pumps up to a hydroponic garden, which we are going to eat food out of. The waste is going to then get pumped up to do the brackish thing I was talking about earlier, which will then be the macroalgae farm. And then once that greenhouse is established, quarantined, good to go, I've got the frags ready to sell, then I will release a website and put it out. But until then, you'll have to message me, and also I'm scared to ship things. So otherwise, Tiana would have her hype me out.
I will find you one day, though. Don't worry. So keep growing that little booger for me. Oh my gosh! Now, you had said, your listing of macro as far as easiest to hardest, what it takes.
Yeah.
That you are going to make that available for us after the live.
So what I actually have a couple of things I'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
I have the tank rank, which I can tank rank your tank at shows for free. But if you want me to do it, I've been told by my accountant I have to charge $3 for it. But unless he finds out, Anyway, tank rank, that'll put you on the tier list. and then I can match you up with certain algae. I also have everything that I have available as a file with, like, for example, let me find one. We'll do blue hypnea. So here's my little page about blue hypnea and everything that it likes and things that you need. Just a basic, simple write-up about everything about that coral. And I can drop that file. It also has an herbivore guide, because what a lot of they buy an algae, they put it in their display tank, and all of a sudden it's gone. There are lots of things that eat algae and lots of things that won't eat certain algae. So I have gone through the trouble of actually listing each thing and what kinds of algae it will eat, as well as a disclaimer. For my farm, I have had angelfish, filefish, sea hares, clownfish, tang, sea lettuce, and puffers, depending on the species, all integrated with no risk. So finding the right species for you is key. Once again, that'll come in a tank rank. I have you like fill out a form, and then I spit you out a list of everything that you can put in your display versus a hang on the back. I also can help you design a custom refugium. So like, for example, let me show you my tank. I'm a big fan of how my tank is run. So this is my poopy doo-doo sump. It is a 75 gallon. I've got the biggest reef octo I could get a hold of. I have a UV. This is actually the Innovative Marine overflow, and I put it directly underneath my thing. I do not run socks on mine. I don't use rollers or anything like that. I think what's really important, and people don't realize it, is they pay all this money to do water changes, and they pay all this money to put all these things in their tank. And then they put in carbon, and they put in skimmers, and they put in all these things to take it out. The things that you have paid for, all the molecules that you've made, you put things in and you take them out. So I'm a big anti-sock person. I think it kills your microfauna, like pods and all of that. I think it's just really bad in general. What you can do is have something like this, where this is where it goes under. I don't know what this is called.
Yes.
But you can put a little filter floss pad in between here, and now these pods and all of your microfauna can actually escape. They can go on either side and run off, but all of your particles that make your water quality bad get hung, like you're seeing here. That's my little pod hotels in the back. That's really important whenever you want to grow macroalgae, because a lot of these are symbiotic. That's my Merman's shaving brush. That's pencil tip, and the grape caulerpa got trimmed today. And so I put one runner down here. Probably in a week, this will be full.
Oh.
And I was talking.
Yeah.
Oh, Kraken, he's my green star. Everybody who thinks they want this, no, you don't. You want a green death. Let me show you why. Come here, buddy. Oh, my buddy. This is like an octopus. He's so cool and intelligent, and he's got the arms. He's mean. What they do is they actually make a trap like this, and they crush their prey. So he lives in the sump because if I have extra food, he will go and hunt it, and it's really cool to watch. And I don't have a bunch of chunks of, food hanging out in my tank. He's a really cool cleanup crew. Being creative with your cleanup crew can help problems as well. But we were talking about iron. This is ferric oxide lava rock, and it will
Okay.
leach.
Guys, listen real close to this because I already know, and I only know because she told me earlier, but guys, pay attention right here. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tia.
So what I have down here is actually miracle mud. It's not the same as it was. So what I've actually done is mix it with sand from the lake in Tennessee. I went out one day and dug about 2-3 feet in the ground until I hit this silt where it's got all this nasty anoxic, really, really trace element rich crap that's like horrible slime. You'll know when you see it. And I cleaned it, and I ran an undergravel filter on it for several weeks. I slowly made it saltwater, and that is almost like the old Miracle Mud when you cut it with current Miracle Mud. Maybe one day I'll sell that. I don't know, but this thing is my Lord and Savior. Love it. But this is ferric oxide lava rock. It is approximately $6 for a big bag of it at Home Depot. It will slowly leach iron 3 into your tank. ICP tests test for iron 2 depending on the kind. So if you test my tank with an ICP, it will say my iron is 0 or really, really low. If you use a Salifert iron kit, it will say that my iron is too high, it is lethal levels, because iron 3 typically doesn't show up in a test. That's something that I'm going to go pick ICP Analysis's guy's brain at in June and be like, why don't you test for my iron? But this will leach out iron in your tank, and it will keep your red algae red. It also really, really impacts your fish immune system. But you cannot run this with carbon because carbon will absorb it. This stuff will start disintegrating. It just won't work. So I'm a really big fan of this rock. It's actually the substrate underneath my tank. This has a 7-inch sand bed. And so I did the bottom layer, this rock and the silt. And then I did Fiji pink on the top with a layer of the crushed aragonite. And my dragon wrasse has just torn it up. Like it's destroyed my little layers. But yeah. But yeah, that is refugium. It's not really a refugium. It's just kind of a pile of assorted things. And then I have over here my algae scrubber. Now, if you will notice, this is made out of trash. So this is a Fluval light that I got for free from a tank from Facebook Marketplace. It has no fancy spectrum. This is just a regular old white light. It is growing all kinds of nasty junk. This is PVC. I bought all of this at Home Depot. This is a little nozzle, regular old tubing. And then this is a joint, a joint, a joint, 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 joint. So you make like this little frame, and you can cut a slit along the, well, my phone's turning. Cut a slit along this, and this is from Joann's Fabric Store. It is crochet needlepoint fabric.
Yeah.
Or crochet, whatever it is, plastic.
Plastic canvas, yeah.
Yeah, this was made for about 20 bucks. It is amazing. I've had it on here since, Logan, how long have I had this tank? 8 months, something like that. I clean this once a week, and the only way that I clean it is I take my little hand and I dry it up, and I make fish food with it, because this is nutrients. All of this is nutrients. So I actually sun dry it in like a paste outside on the porch, and I mix it in with my little pellets, which I'll show you my little pellets here. I do make my own food, but this is very similar to TDO or SA or anything like that. But yeah, that's my little homemade food. It's really gross smelling. Don't get me wrong. It's horrible. But yeah, I put those nutrients right back in my tank. So that's really fun.
Oh, well,
And I have,
that's just so cool. I did not know that part, y'all. I was talking about the rock that she got at Home Depot. I did not know about that you sun dried that and made it into your fish food.
well, you know, and one of the big things that I hate is homemade fish food. And I have to give a disclaimer on that, because everybody has seen the BRS video where you can make reef chili and blah, blah, blah. What they don't tell you is if you go to the grocery store and you buy seafood, let's say scallops, and you, well, so I went to school in Alabama, and we did Dauphin Island, which is a really big shellfish place. There's a company based out of Dauphin Island, and all they do is harvest shellfish and bring it in. And I was on the boat, and we were scanning. We had like a little tester that we were doing, testing for flesh-eating bacteria. And it wasn't that if it was present, we weren't allowed to ship it off. It's that it had to be under 30% present, and then we could ship it off. So if you go to the grocery store and you have something that was caught and it's got flesh-eating bacteria in it, let's say, just as an example, and you have it, you know, straight from the boat, it's frozen, and then it gets shipped and it thaws, and then it gets frozen, and then it gets shipped and it thaws, and then it gets frozen, you are culturing flesh-eating bacteria and then feeding it to your fish. So I would rather use things like LRS. I know Larry DuPont goes to great lengths to make sure all of his foods are sterile. I know that people who are dedicated solely to fish food are making things that are actually healthy. There was one company that reached out to me after I had done a nutrition talk and said, oh, we want you to be a rep, blah, blah, blah. I said, you probably don't, because I'm going to ask for every parameter that you offer. So can you give me like an ingredient list, how you source it, where you source it, what you do to clean? And he goes, well, I go out on my boat and I catch fish, and it's fresh fish straight from the ocean, and I blend it up and I sell it to my local fish store in a Ziploc bag and I slap a label on it. And I was like, I will never endorse you. Like, that's horrible. You can kill people's tanks. He's like, well, everybody who's tried it's loved it. And I was like, is everyone who tried it a hobbyist? Is there anyone who's reviewed your stuff? He's like, no. And I was like, I would never speak to you again. Thank you. So please don't make your own food, especially if you go to like an Asian market where it's sitting out and then you hand select. Please don't do that. You're basically giving your fish bloat. If you've ever seen in YouTube videos, you can usually pick it out a lot easier. In tangs, there's a little section. It's where it gets emaciated, if you've ever seen that. And if you see that it's physically bloated, that actually could be potentially a gram-negative bacteria in their intestines. And it usually comes from homemade food. And it doesn't necessarily kill them, but it doesn't keep them healthy either. It makes them really susceptible to ick. I mean, they're constantly fighting basically poopy doo-doo. And if your tank is exploding poop in your videos, why are you, yeah, I have a lot of bones to pick. Homemade food is bad, y'all, but drying your algae and making it a flake and mixing it in with a pellet is fine. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Be careful, but you can.
Say what?
I said, be careful, but you can do algae. Algae is fine.
Yeah. I don't know about y'all, but like I've just gotten this huge lesson of on macroalgae and nutrients and oh my gosh, so many things. Making your own fish food. That's all. I mean, you've brought so much to our light, and gosh, do I appreciate that.
Well, all of it has come from people that I talk to, and I try to go through great lengths of my number one thing, and my pet peeve is that people who are an expert in everything, I hate that. I am not an expert in everything. What I really focus on is nutrition and nutrients, and that's all I do. If you come to me and you ask me to identify a jellyfish or identify a pod, I'm going to tell you to go to Chad Clayton or Travis Brandlewood, who is breeding these things, or Tom Coyle. I sent somebody to Tom Coyle the other day because they had an anemone question. I'm like, I'm not an anemone person. Like, so I am not an expert by all means, but what I try to focus on is nutrition because I feel like it's a building block for everything else. So it just happens to apply to a lot of things. But mainly I try not to say chemistry words, but it's chemistry. It's just a lot of chemistry. So,
oh, yeah. Man. Now, Tia, you're going to drop what you can after the live, right? On different things. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Good. Because I know you have sparked so much interest for so many. And, if someone can someone message you and send you a picture and say, hey, this is what I've got. Can you tell me, why is my macro, looking like it's dying or whatever? Can you tell me what kind of macro this is? Is that okay?
Always, yeah. And I do disease ID too. I was going to vet school to be an aquatic vet, but I had a lot of health stuff happen and burnout. So I do, disease ID and nutrient profiles and macro ID. But you can always message me anything, and if I don't know, I will try to send you to someone who does, because I definitely don't know everything. So, but yeah.
That a lot of people will ask me different things, and oh God, no, I'm no Tia Davis. I can tell you that. But I mean, there's a few things that I'm certain that I know that has worked for me that I do, and I'll say this works for me. Not that it's going to work for you, but this is what I do. But if I'm not 100% dead sure that is the correct answer, I will tell you. I don't really know, but maybe I can help you find out, or I can point you in the right direction, because I do not like to send out misinformation, if at all possible.
And also, if anybody wants to buy cool macros, there is Mosaic Macros on Etsy. They do have a constantly rotating supply, but I trust them 100%. I have seen their algae. I have looked at it to make sure there's not diseases. I traded with them here recently. If you want macroalgae right now, you're inspired to go spend some money, go to them. They're great. They actually do have an Etsy page, and all of their stuff came really, really quickly. It was amazing whenever it arrived. They packaged it really well. And it was also 32 degrees whenever they shipped it to me. And it sat on my porch for about 2 hours, and I almost cried, but all of it made it. So it's all really strong, hardy stuff. I love them. But yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I have heard of Mosaic thanks to Jaden. They've bought from them before and extremely happy with their macros. And I was like, Etsy? Who would have thought to look on Etsy? I wouldn't have, but they did.
Now, eBay is sketchy. I was being dumb, and I needed a bunch of pods like right now because my Dragon Wrasse was going on strike. I was freaking out because it stopped taking food. And so I went on eBay and I ordered a bunch of pods. So I was like, it's pods. They're probably called for forever. And whenever it arrived, there was little to no pods and a gigantic ctenophore in it, which ctenophores are the jellyfish that like have all the cool lights. And wasn't upset that I got it, but I was upset that I didn't get pods. And so maybe don't order from eBay. eBay is a little sketch. And whenever I messaged him, I was like, hey, I didn't get any pods. I got a cool jellyfish. Can you guys like send it again? I really need the pods. And they were like, can't you just throw away the tinny jellyfish? They didn't say tiny. They said tinny. It was like, so Etsy's good. eBay is not. But yeah, Etsy's fine.
I love that. But I know when Jaden said that they, I was like, oh, where'd you get that? And she was like, or they was like, mosaic on Etsy. And I was like, I would have never thought to have searched Etsy for macro. But of course I went over there and I was like, oh man, they do have macro on Etsy.
Yeah, they're awesome.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh, Taya, thank you. I know I've kept you way longer than I should have. Oh my God. This has just been amazing. I'm just blown away because all the information, and I do know I am going to have to go back and rewatch it again and again and again. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers are, because if you guys missed like 1 second of it, maybe you had to go make a bathroom break or something. I'm telling you, you missed some really important, great information. So you're going to want to go back and rewatch it. And Tia, all of our, after about a week, our videos are moved to our YouTube channel. So it will be forever over there. And, they can search it. They'll be in order in which we've done them and stuff. So they will be stored over there on YouTube. And I do want you to feel free to drop any of the information, that you can, that we talked about. And, gosh, thank you.
And everybody wants to message me anytime. Literally all I do is sit on Facebook. So. To the point where it might be a little bit of a problem. So. Well,
I'll tell you, you just opened yourself up, because I can just already hear your phone going ding, ding, ding. Because you are just a wealth of knowledge and you have brought so much to us. And
you should see my
I should see what?
My psycho journals. If you go to a show, this is always what people are like, what the hell? Let me see that. So I'm trying to put them all together. I'll show you this one. So like, they're all beat up and like, here. What this is it's like how to identify every newt ever. All the different crocodilia and like, it's insane. Phylums have like interactive drawings, talk about chitin anatomy, flatworms, how to kill them, jellyfish, with like all of the different anatomy, and pieces of amphipods, how to kill the parasitic ones. Like if you ever see me at a show, like this is my encyclopedia. All of this is actually my brain, like all of it. So these are the psycho journals. I really should like make a YouTube or something about all of this. I just hate doing videos, except for you. I did one special for you, but
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I mean, like, I've been amazed, and I've been, trying to read some of the comments, and they're just like, oh my God, this is unreal. This is crazy, and so everyone's just super excited. And yes, Christopher, she should produce a book, because you are just like a wealth of knowledge, and maybe you're not an expert on everything, but what you focus on, you have it. I mean, you've got the answers, and for that I'm extremely grateful. Oh, I thank you for Oh, oh gosh, y'all, we lost her. I know. I kept her so long, and I kept all of you an hour and a half, y'all. I apologize for that. Yes, we did. Oh, Tia's phone died. It may have. Her phone may have died because like we've been talking like forever. But I've learned a lot. And I know you guys have. And she's gonna post some information on the page. You guys are gonna want to screenshot that, save it, whatever you need to do, because the knowledge that she has is just unreal. And I am grateful. You're on the iPad now. Okay. Okay. Well, we can't connect on the iPad, so but seriously, I know, Tom, it's been an hour and a half. I'm like, I glanced at that clock a while ago and I was like, you know, but we've had so much to talk about, and there's still so much. I mean, we could probably do a part two, Tia, keep that in mind. We could probably do a part two and, not talk about the same thing twice. And, so gosh, thank you. I appreciate this. I really do. And, just absolutely, if you guys have a question, don't everybody blow her phone up at one time. Well, it's dead now, but she can answer you on the iPad. But don't everybody blow it up at one time. But seriously, if you've got a concern, about something that, she has talked about, or you got a question, or maybe you didn't quite understand it on the live, she said we could message her, and I'm very grateful for that. Because, she's got some knowledge that is just blows me away. I was like, man, I'm excited. I'm super excited. And there you go. Kevin Wisen said, I would travel to where she is at and buy lunch and dinner just to talk in between. That's right. Because it's just unreal the amount of knowledge that she has got. And Jaden wants a part two. I believe we could put up a poll and see if anyone wants to do a part two. We'll let her rest and charge her phone and stuff, but we can book her another date, I bet. And I'm in Tia says, I'm in Tennessee. Take me on a fish date. There you go. Oh my gosh. Thank you so very much again for all of that. And Tia, if it's possible, we will. See, Ronell says yes, part 2, 3, and 4. we might be reaching back out again, or, reach out to us. And we were glad to schedule you in for a part 2. For those of you that don't know, I see Kevin may do that. Kevin might can go fishing too. For those of you that don't know, Tank Talk is going to make an appearance in Orlando this weekend. I do hope to meet a bunch of you guys there. It's exciting. Never been, so I'm looking forward to it. A little nervous, but we'll get over that. Anyway, you guys take care. My next show is at the Aquatic Expo. Okay, Tia, see, that's one of the things I was going to ask is what shows you had coming up that we could expect to see you at. Anyway, if you want to, you can either drop it here in the comments or, post it on the page, your list of shows that you're going to, where people can find you, because I think they're going to be looking for you now. Anyway, you guys take care. Let's see, this is Tuesday. We're flying out on Friday, so I will not see. I'll be gone, but expect to see some pop-up lives from Orlando. I will keep you guys, those that can't come, I will make sure that you get to see a lot of the good stuff that it goes on in Orlando. So anyway, you guys take care. Have you a wonderful evening. Tia, thank you so very much. It is greatly appreciated. Tia, I was thinking of going to Rap in New York, but you're not sure yet. Please keep us updated because, if you've got some shows for sure booked, be sure and put those in, make a post on Tank Talk and let us know. And feel free to post the information that you feel it would be helpful for all of us, on the macros or whatever you want. So just let us know. And anyway, y'all take care. Have you a wonderful evening. And I guess I will see you live from Orlando. Good night, y'all.